Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Western Canon Challenge, where we are reading the entirety of the Western Literary Canon out loud. Today's video is the last installment of Journal Collection number 33, and it begins, at least the specific section, in November 11th. And with that said, I'll go ahead and read that. The selfish man suffers more from his selfishness than he from whom that selfishness withholds some important benefit. Today I have the feeling, to a degree not experienced by me before, that discussions, like that of yesterday and many the like in which I have participated, invade and injure me. I often have felt emptiness and restlessness to a sort of hatred of the human race after such prating by me and my fellows, but never so seriously as now, that absence from them is better for me than the taking an active part in them. You may associate on what grounds you like, for economy, or for a good neighborhood, for a school, or for whatever reason, only do not say that the divine Spirit enjoins it. The Spirit detaches you from all associations, and makes you, to your own astonishment, secretly a member of the universal association, but it descends to no specialties, draws up no articles of a society, but leaves you just as you were for that matter, to be guided by your particular convenience and circumstance whether to join with others or whether to go alone. It seems to be true that our New England population was settled by the most religious and ideal of the Puritans of England. It is natural enough that we should be more ideal than Old England. It is taking a great liberty with a man to offer to lend him a book, as if he also had not access to that truth to which the bookmaker had access. Each of the books, if I read, invades me, displaces me. The law of it is that it should be first, that I should give way to it. I, who have no right to give way, and if I would be tranquil and divine again, I must dismiss the book. And yet I expect a great man to be a good reader, or in proportion to the spontaneous power should be the assimilating power. Every book serves us at last only by adding some one word to our vocabulary, or perhaps two or three. And perhaps that word shall not be in the volume, or shall only be the author's name. And yet there are books of no vulgar origin, but the work and the proof of faculties so comprehensive, so nearly equal to the universe which they paint, that although one shuts them also with the meaner ones, yet he says with a sigh the while, this were to be read in a long thousands of years by some stream in paradise. Do not gloze and prate and mystify. Here as our dear, grand Alcott says, you shall dig in my field for a day, and I will give you $1 when it is done, and it shall not be a business transaction. It makes me sick, whilst money is the measure really adopted by us all as the most convenient measure of all material values. Let us not affectedly disuse the name and mystify ourselves and others. Let us not, say no and take it, We may very well and honestly have theoretical and practical objections to it. If they are fatal to the use of money and barter, let us disuse them. If they are less grave than the inconvenience of abolishing traffic, let us not pretend to have done with it, whilst we eat and drink and wear and breathe it. Do not be too timid and squeamish about your actions. All life is an experiment. The more experiments you make, the better. What if they are a little coarse, and you may get your coat soiled or torn? What if you do fail, and get fairly rolled in the dirt once or twice? Up again you shall never be so afraid of a tumble. This matter of the lectures, for instance. The engagement drives your thoughts and studies to a head, and enables you to do somewhat not otherwise practicable. That is the action. Then there is the reaction. When you bring your discourse to your auditory, it shows differently. You have more power than you had thought of, or less. The thing fits or does not fit, is good or detestable. It is a peculiar feature of New England that young farmers and mechanics who work all summer on the soil or in a shop take a school in the winter months. Mr. Fay, the pump maker in this town, goes to Marlborough this winter for that purpose. Young Wheeler and Wood do the same thing. Edmund Hosmer was willing to sell his farm 5 years ago for $3,800 and go to the West. He found and still finds that the Irish, of which there are 200 in this town, are underselling him in labor, and he does not see how he and his boys can do those things which only he is willing to do, for go to the market he will not, nor shall his boys, with his consent, do any of those things for which high wages are paid, as for example, take any shop or the office of foreman or agent in any corporation, wherein there seemed to be a premium paid for faculty, as if it were paid for the faculty of cheating. He does not see how he and his children are to prosper here, and the only way for them is to run, the Caucasian before the Irishman. I call the terror of starving skepticism, and say that I do not believe that I can be put in any condition in which I cannot honestly maintain myself and honestly be rich, that is, not be poor. It is in vain that you put to me any case of misfortune or calamity. The extremist, the Manchester weaver, the Carolina slave, I doubt not that in the history of the individual is always an account of his condition, and he knows himself to be party to his present estate. Put me in his condition, and I should see its outlets and reliefs, though now I see them not. The main and capital remedy of the religious sentiment, and all the abundance of its counsels for his special distresses, it were atheism to doubt. But do not require of me, sitting out here, to say what he, within there, ought to do. I can never meddle with other people's facts. I have enough of my own. But this one thing I know, that if I do not clear myself, I am in fault, and that my condition is matched, point for point, with every other man's. I can only dispose of my own facts. Last night Henry Thoreau read me verses which pleased, if not by beauty of particular lines, yet by the honest truth, and by the length of flight and strength of wing, for most of our poets are only writers of lines or of epigrams. These of Henry's at least have rude strength, and we do not come to the bottom of the mine. Their fault is, that the gold does not yet flow pure, but is drossy and crude. The thyme and marjoram are not yet made into honey. The assimilation is imperfect. It seems as if the poetry was all written before time was. But it is a great pleasure to have poetry of the second degree also, and mass here, as in other instances, is some compensation for superior quality, for I find myself stimulated and rejoiced like one who should see a cargo of sea-shells discharged on the wharf, whole boxes and crates of conches, cypres, cones, neritas, cardiums, murexes, though there should be no pearl oyster, nor one shell of great rarity and value among them. Time is the little gray man who takes out of his breast pocket first a pocket-book, then a doll and telescope, then a turkey carpet, then 4 saddled and bridled nags, and a sumptuous canvas tent. We are accustomed to chemistry, and it does not surprise us. But chemistry is but a name for changes and developments as wonderful as those of this breast pocket. I was a little chubby boy, trundling a hoop in Chauncey Place, and spouting poetry from Scott and Campbell at the Latin School. But Time, the little gray man, has taken out of his vest pocket a great awkward house, in a corner of which I sit down and write of him, some acres of land, several full grown and several very young persons, and seated them close beside me. Then he has taken that chubbiness and that hoop quite away, to be sure he has left the declamation and the poetry, and here left a long, lean person threatening to be a little gray man like himself. Religion has failed. Yes, the religion of another man has failed to save me, but it has saved him. We speak of the past with pity and reprobation, but through the enormities, evils, and temptations of the past, saints and heroes slipped into heaven. There is no spot in Europe but has been a battlefield. There is no religion, no church, no sect, no year of history, but has served men to rise by to scale the walls of heaven and enter into the banquets of angels. Our fathers are saved. Precisely the same conflicts have always stood as now, with slight shiftings of scene and costume. November 19th. I should willingly give you an account of one of these conversations. For example, we had one yesterday afternoon. I begged Alcott to paint out his project, and he proceeded to say that there should be found a farm of 100 acres in excellent condition, with good buildings, a good orchard, and grounds which admitted of being laid out with great beauty, and this should be purchased and given to them in the first place. I replied, "You ask too much. This is not solving the problem. There are hundreds of innocent young persons, whom if you will thus establish and endow and protect, you will find it no hard matter to keep their innocency, and to see their tranquil household after all this has been done for them, will in no wise instruct or strengthen me. But he will instruct and strengthen me, who, there where he is, unaided, in the midst of poverty, toil, and traffic, extricates himself from the corruptions of the same, and builds on his land a house of peace and benefit, good customs, and free thoughts." "But," replied Alcott, "how is this to be done? How can I do it who have a wife and family to maintain?" I answered that he has not the person to do it, or he would not ask the question. When he that shall come is born, he will not only see the thing to be done, but invent the ways and means of doing it. The way you would show me does not commend itself to me as the way of greatness. The Spirit does not stipulate for land and exemption from taxes, but in great straits and want, or even on no land, nowhere to lay its head, it manages, without asking for land, to occupy and enjoy all land, for it is the law by which land exists. It classifies and distributes the whole creation anew. If you ask for application to particulars of the way of the Spirit, I shall say that the cooperation you look for is such cooperation as colleges and all secular institutions look for, money. True cooperation comes in another manner. A man quite unexpectedly shows me that which I and all souls look for, and I cry, "That is it. Take me in mine. I count it my chief good to do in my way that very thing." That is real cooperation, unlimited, uncalculating, infinite cooperation. The Spirit is not half so slow or immediate or needful of conditions or organs as you suppose. A few persons in the course of my life have at certain moments appeared to me, not measured men of 5 feet 5 or 10 inches, but large, enormous, indefinite. But these were not great proprietors, nor heads of communities, nor men in office, or in any action which affected large numbers of men, but, on the contrary, nothing could be more private. They were in some want, or affliction, or other relation which called out the emanation of the Spirit, which dignified and transfigured them to my eye. And the good Spirit will burn and blaze in the cinders of your condition, in the drudgeries of your endeavor, in the very process of extricating us from the evils of want and of a bad society. This fatal fault in the logic of our friends still appears. Their whole doctrine is spiritual, but they always end with saying, "Give us much land and money." If I should give them anything, it would be facility and not beneficence. Unless one should say after the maxims of the world, let them drink their own error to saturation, and this will be the best hellebore. I know the Spirit by its victorious tone. An immense force has that man whose part is taken, and who does not wait for society in any part of his conduct of life. Now it is plain, of our three adventurers, that this gives them the most of their importance with us, and the deductions to be made from each are the hesitations at the plunge, the reserves which they still make, and the reliances and expectations they still cherish on the arm of flesh, the aid of others. A reformer must be born. He can never be made such by reasons. All reform, like all form, is by the grace of God, and not otherwise. "You ask, O Theanor," said Amphiotron, "that I should go forth from this place with my wife and my children, and that you and your family may enter and possess it. The same request in substance has been often made to me before by numbers of persons. Now I also think that I and my wife ought to go forth from this house, and work all day in the fields, and lie at night under some thicket, but I am waiting where I am, only until some god shall point out to me which among all these applicants, yourself or some other, is the rightful claimant. Transcendentalism is a saturnalia of faith. It is faith run mad. Nature is transcendental. Lathe. It seems strange to men that they should thus forget so fast, that they became suspicious, that there was some treachery, and began to suspect their food, that perhaps the bread they eat or the flesh was narcotic. Hence rose Graham societies. Government should find its perfectness in its obedience and good conduction of the elemental fluids. Because persons will have their effect, and things theirs, we are safe anyhow. I think the power of things, such that property's will is done whether by law or against law, openly or underhand. It was obviously the feeling and the right of a ruder age to say persons must make law for persons, property for property. But now we begin to feel that persons are the only interest, and that property will follow them. That especial care need not be given to the farm. Let us be wise in the culture of men being the end of government. Love will write the law, and the law which has been so given will be gentle. Since I have been here in New York, I have grown less diffident of my political opinions. I suppose once the democracy must be right. I see that they are aimless. Whigs have the best men, Democrats the best cause, but the last are destructive, not constructive. What hope, what end have they? November 25th. Yesterday I read Dickens's American Notes. It answers its end very well, which plainly was to make a readable book, nothing more. Truth is not his object for a single instant, but merely to make good points in a lively sequence, and he proceeds very well. As an account of America, it is not to be considered for a moment. It is too short and too narrow, too superficial and too ignorant, too slight and too fabulous, and the man totally unequal to the work. A very lively rattle on that nuisance, a sea voyage, is the first chapter, and a pretty fair example of the historical truth of the whole book. We can hear throughout every page the dialogue between the author and his publisher. Mr. Dickens, the book must be entertaining. That is the essential point. Truth? Damn truth, I tell you, it must be entertaining. As a picture of American manners, nothing can be falser. No such conversations ever occur in this country in real life, as he relates. He has picked up and noted with eagerness each odd local phrase that he met with, and when he had a story to relate, has joined them together, so that the result is the broadest caricature, and the scene might as truly have been laid in Wales or in England as in the States. Monstrous exaggeration is an easy secret of romance. But Americans, who like some of us Massachusetts people are not fond of spitting, will go from Maine to New Orleans and meet no more annoyance than we should in Britain or France. So with yes, so with fixings, so with soap and towels, and all the other trivialities which this trifler detected in traveling over half the world. The book makes but a poor apology for its author, who certainly appears in no dignified or enviable position. November 26th. The young people like Brownson, Channing, Green, Elizabeth P. Peabody, and possibly Bancroft think that the vice of the age is to exaggerate individualism, and they adopt the word la humanité from Leroux and go for the race. Hence the phalanx, Owenism, Simonism, the communities. The same spirit in theology has produced the Puseyism, which endeavors to rear the church as a balance and overpoise to the conscience. London, New York, Boston are phalanxes ready-made where you shall find concerts, books, balls, medical lectures, prayers, or Punch and Judy, according to your fancy, on any night or day. It is indifferent whether you show a new object to the child or a new relation to an old object. You may give him another toy, or you may show him the iron block among his blocks is a magnet. The avaricious man seeks to add to the number of his toys, the scientific man to find new relations. You never can hurt us by new ideas. Godspeed you, gentlemen reformers. Bancroft and Bryant are historical Democrats who are interested in dead or organized, but not in organizing liberty. Bancroft would not know George Fox, whom he had so well eulogized, if he should meet him in the street. It is like Lyell's science, who did not know by sight when George B. Emerson showed him them, the shells he has described in his geology. I think four walls one of the best of our institutions. A man comes to me and oppresses me by his presence. He looks very large and unanswerable. I cannot dispose of him whilst he stays. He quits the room and passes not only out of the house, but, as it were, out of the horizon. He is a mere phantom or ghost. I think of him no more. I recover my sanity. The universe dawns on me again. W. H. Channing thinks that not in solitude but in love, in the actual society of beloved persons, have been his highest intuitions. To me it sounds like the shallow verbs and nouns. For in closet society a man is by thought wrapped into remotest isolation. No man can be criticized but by a greater than he. Do not, then, read the reviews. Wordsworth dismisses a whole regiment of poets from their vocation. The world is waking up to the idea of union, but the union is only perfect when all the unities are absolutely isolated. Each man being the universe, if he attempt to join himself to others, he instantly is jostled, crowded, cramped, halved, quartered, or on all sides diminished of his proportion, and the stricter the union, the less and more pitiful he is. But let him go alone, and, recognizing the perfect in every moment with entire obedience, he will go up and down doing the works of a true member, and, to the astonishment of all, the whole work will be done with concert. Though no man spoke, government will be adamantine without any governor. Union ideal, in actual individualism, actual union, then would be the culmination of science, useful art, fine art, and culmination on culmination. The tongue of flame, the picture the newspapers give at the late fire in Liverpool of the mountains of burning cotton, over which the flame arose to twice their height, the volcano also from which the conflagration rises towards the zenith, an appreciable distance toward the stars. These are the most affecting symbols of what man should be. A spark of fire is infinitely deep, but a mass of fire reaching from earth upward into the heaven, this is the fire of the robust, united, burning, radiant fuel. Fate, yes, our music box only plays certain tunes, and never a sweeter strain, but we are assured that our barrel is not a dead, but a live barrel. Nay, is only a part of the tune, and changes like that. Conservatism stands on this, that a man cannot jump out of his skin, and well for him that he cannot, for his skin is the world, and the stars of heaven do hold him there, and the folly of men glitters the wisdom of God. This old Bible, if you pitch it out of the window with a fork, it comes bounce back again. Several steps. A man's greatness is to advance on a line. Simple recipiency is the virtue of space, not of man. To him belongs progress. He builds himself on himself. Angelo, Dante, Milton, Swedenborg, Pythagoras, Paracelsus were men of great robustness. They built not only with energy but symmetry, and their work could be called architecture. Napoleon lately was an architect. December. The trick of every man's conversation we soon learn. In one, this remorseless Buddhism lies all around, threatening with death and night. We make a little fire in our cabin, but we dare not go abroad 1 furlong into the murderous cold. Every thought, every enterprise, every sentiment has its ruin in this horrid infinite which circles us and awaits our dropping into it. If killing all Buddhists would do the least good, we would have a slaughter of the innocents directly. In Orpheus, the Demiurges interrogates Night thus, quote, "Tell me how all things will as one subsist, yet each its nature separate preserve." It is the problem proposed to the Fourierist. The blue sky is a fit covering for a cottage or a market and for the meeting of supernatural forms and events of magic and of fairyland. Could my most poetic dream fall true and realize itself to my faith in some golden moment in the presence and by the concurrence of all gods, I should look upward into the identical web of blue depth which I see as I trudge along the road to the post office. And yet no dream could have that sky. It is like the touch of God. It discerns between shadow and substance. The look of the zenith, would not our friend Lane reckon that a, quote, real experience, end quote? There was a conversation last evening at our good Mrs. B.'s on the family, which was quite too narrowing and exclusive. There was a very unnecessary hostility in a great deal of the talk. A hostility in the hearers was presumed, and we were valiant men full of fight, ready and able to break a lance for our faith. Lane is so skilful, instant, and witty, there is no loitering or repetition in his speech, that I delight to hear him and forgive everything to so much ability. Yet he is very provoking and warlike in this manner. He rails at trades and cities, and yet it is obvious in every word he says how much he is the debtor to both. There is a wisdom of life about them, a toughness and solidity of experience that makes them always entertaining and makes Alcott's words look pale and lifeless. I came away from the company in better spirits than from any party this long time, for I did not speak one word. Perhaps the proper reply to the tone of dogmatism should have been, "Shall there be no more cakes and ale? Why so much stress?" 2 meals a day. A poet may eat bread for his breakfast and bread and flesh for his dinner, but for his supper he must eat stars only. Romeo was minister of Raymond Berenger, Count of Provence. He managed the affairs of his master so well that each one of his 4 daughters became a queen. Margaret, the eldest, was married to Louis IX of France. Eleanor, the next, to Henry III of England. Sancha the third to Richard, Henry's brother, and King of the Romans. And Beatrice, the youngest, to Charles I, King of Naples and Sicily, and brother to Louis. The provincial barons, enviers of Romeo, instigated the count, his master, to demand of him an account of the revenues he had so carefully husbanded, and the prince as lavishly dispersed. Then Romeo demanded the little mule, the staff, and the scrip, with which he had first entered into the count's service, a stranger pilgrim from the shrine of St. James in Galatia, and departed as he came, nor was it ever known whence he was or whither he went. See Dante, Paradiso, Canto 6. Oh, what would nature say? She spared no speech today. The fungus and the bulrush spoke, answered the pine tree and the oak. The wizard south blew down the glen, filled the straits and filled the wide. Each maple leaf turned up its silver side. The south wind blows, I leave my book. I need not bide in nature long, could I transfer my life to song. It needs the lapsing centuries to tell you the wit of the passing breeze, and yet the landscape taunts me, advancing, then receding. Quote, "Full of many a glorious morning have I seen," and quote, that is a bold saying. Few men have seen many mornings. This day when I woke, I felt the peace of the morning, and I knew that I seldom behold it. I hear the whistle of the locomotive in the woods. Wherever that music comes, it has its sequel. It is the voice of the civility of the 19th century saying, "Here I am." It is interrogative. It is prophetic, and this Cassandra is believed. Woo, woo, woo. How is real estate here in the swamp and wilderness? Ho for Boston. Woo, woo. Down with that forest on the side of the hill. I want 10,000 chestnut sleepers. I want cedar posts and hundreds of thousands of feet of boards. Up, my masters of oak and pine. You have waited long enough. A good part of a century in the wind and stupid sky. Ho for axes and saws, and away with me to Boston. Woo, woo, I will plant a dozen houses on this pasture next moon, and a village anon. And I will sprinkle yonder square mile with white houses like the broken snowbanks that strow it in March. History. Something gets possession and elbows all the rest aside. Yet there hang these clouds of dissenters and fanatics and prophets like Arabs in the horizon or on the mountains waiting their turn and kingdom. Fixtures none. The world is the prey and dominion of thoughts. History is a foolish pragmatic misstatement. As easily might you survey a cloud, which is now as big as your hat, and before you have measured its first angle covers 10 acres. Thoughts work and make what you call the world. Heroes are the lucky individuals who stand at the pole and are the largest and ripest. Miracle comes to the miraculous, not to the arithmetician. These idealists have no memory, no retrospect, no baggage wagon of a tradition at their back, but have their eye forward and their foot forward, for their whole attention is to the fact of creation now being and to be. The world is too rich for us. We have hardly set our hearts on one toy, say a house and land, before a poetic reputation seems the high prize, then eloquence, then political power, then asceticism, and then art. And thus each of many things draws us aside from the other. If in choosing one we could drink a cup of Lethe to the others, we should not be robbed of satisfaction. December 10th. A good visit to Boston, and saw Sam Ward and Ellery to advantage, and my Parian sister. Ellery has such an affectionate speech, and a tone that is tremulous with emotion, that he is a flower in the wind. He says he has an immense dispersing power. Ward is wise and beautiful, and said and admitted the best things. He had found out, he said, why people die. It is to break up their style. Life would not be worth taking or keeping if it were not full of surprises. I wake in the morning and go to my window and see the day break and receive from the spectacle a new secret of nature that goes to compromise all my past manner of living and invite me to a new. I am filled with a great tranquillity. I seek to express this somehow and find that I have cut out a Hesperus in marble. Wonderful is the alembic of nature, through which the sentient mind of tranquillity becomes the figure of a youth. But the feeling manages somehow to shed itself over the stone, as if that were porous to love and truth. Yet is not that figure final or adequate. It is a prison rather of the thought, of the emotion, if I am contented with it. The thought scorns it, mocks it as some wretched caricature. The thought has already transcended it. It is already something else, has taken 20,000 shapes, whilst poor Hans was hammering at this one. The oak leaf is perfect, a kind of absolute realized, but every work of art is only relatively good. The artist advances and finds all his fine things not. Nature tends to a fact. She will be expressed. Then scholars are her victims of expression. You who see the artist, the orator, the poet, too near, and find them victims of partiality, pronounce them failures. Very hard it is to keep the middle point. It is a very narrow line. W. said that there was a great deal of deferring and a great deal of wondering and quoting, but a calm of affirming very little. Cannot a man only communicate that which he knows? That nature hates calm system makers. Her methods are saltatory, impulsive. Man lives by pulses. All his organic movements are such, and all chemical and ethereal, even seem to be undulatory or alternate, and so with the mind it antagonizes ever, and gets on so. The Yankee is one who, if he once gets his teeth set on a thing, all creation can't make him let go, who, if he can get hold anywhere of a rope's end or a spar, he will not let it go, but will make it carry him. If he can but find so much as a stump or a log, will hold on to it, and whittle out of it a house and barn, a farm and stock, a mill seat and a village, a railroad and a bank, and various other things equally useful and entertaining. A seat in Congress, or a foreign mission, for example, but these no doubt are inventions of the enemy. C's eyes are a compliment to the human race. That steady look from year to year makes Phidian sculpture and Poussin landscape still real and contemporary. The harvest will be better preserved and go farther laid up in its private bins, in each farmer's corn barn and each woman's basket, than if it were kept in national granaries. In like manner, an amount of money will go farther if expended by each man and woman for their own wants, and in the feeling that this is their all, than if expended by a great steward or national commissioners of the treasury. Take away from me the feeling that I must depend on myself, give me the least hint that I have good friends and backers there in reserve who will gladly help me, and instantly I relax my diligence. I obey the first impulse of generosity that is to cost me nothing, and a certain slackness will creep over my conduct of my affairs. Here is a banknote found on $100. Let it fall into the hands of an easy man who never earned the estate he spends, and see how little difference it will make in his affairs. At the end of the year he is just as much behindhand as ever, and could not have done at all without that 100. Let it fall into the hands of a poor and prudent woman, and every shilling and every cent of it tells, goes to reduce debt, or to add to instant and constant comfort, mends a window, buys a blanket or a pelisse, gets a stove instead of the old cavernous fireplace, all chimney. All the Channings are men of the world, have a little silex in their composition, which gives a good edge, and protects them like a coat of mail. Ellery has the manners and address of a merchant. Elizabeth Hoare affirms that religion bestows a refinement which she misses in the best bred people not religious, and she considers it essential therefore to the flower of gentleness. Here follows a short quotation from Michelangelo, untranslated. I have no thoughts today. What then? What difference does it make? It is only that there does not chance today to be an antagonism to evolve them. The electricity is the more accumulated. A week hence you shall meet somebody or something that shall draw from you a shower of sparks. Traveling is a very humiliating experience to me. I never go to any church like a railroad car for teaching me my deficiencies. For any grandeur of circumstance, length of time seems an indispensable element. Who can attach anything majestic to creatures so short-lived as we men? The time that is proper to spend in mere musing is too large a fraction of 60 and 10 to be indulged to that greatness of behavior. The brevity of human life gives a melancholy to the profession of the architect. There is a comparative innocence in this country and a corresponding health. We do not often see bald boys and gray-haired girls, children victims of gout and apoplexy. The street is not full of nearsighted and deaf people, nor do we see those horrid mutilations and disgusting forms of disease as leprosy and undescribed varieties of plague which European streets exhibit stumps of men. Charles Lane said that our people do not appear to him to have a steadfastness that can be calculated on. Thus Greene may be a trader or a priest or a soldier as probably as a progressive reformer, and so Davis and Robbins and the rest. This results from the greater freedom of circumstance. English and Europeans are guided as with iron belt of condition. The fine and finest young people despise life. Naming, yes, that is the office of the newspapers of the world. These famous editors from Moses, Homer, Confucius, and so on, down to Goethe and Kant. They name what the people have already done, and the thankful people say, quote, Doctor, 'tis a great comfort to know the disease whereof I die. End quote. This is the end of Emerson's journal collection number 33, dating from the year 1842, when the author was 39 years old. Thank you for listening.